Right, well, hello there everyone. This is going to be the first of several videos about the CB500X. So I've had this CB500 for about 2 years now. It's a 2016. I bought it with a few thousand miles on it, and I've been steadily setting it up the way I like it. And over the last couple of years I've done about 10,000 miles on this bike and a couple of other CB500Xs that I've got from hire operators while touring overseas. So I figure that's a good time. The bike is set up pretty much the way I want it now. It's probably a good time to do an owner's review. As most of you will know, there's plenty of these quickie type reviews where someone goes and perhaps borrows the bike from their local bike shop and does a first impressions what I think of a bike. That's got its place, I suppose, but at the end of the day there's a lot to be said for spending time on a bike and finding out what its strengths and weaknesses really are. Anyway, before we do the sort of standard thing, I'll just watch my way through here. Before we get on to the standard likes and dislikes type list, I thought I would start just with a little bit about myself. Oops, looks like school out for a trip. Thank you people, cheers. Anyway, as we get away from the traffic, so what I was going to say is, but I think before I start my list of pet likes and hates of the CB500, or pet likes and dislikes shall we say, I should probably talk a little bit about myself, because although some of these reviews by skilled riders might have some value, I think the biggest issue really is not what some skilled ex-racer thinks of a bike. The question is whether it's suitable for you, and that really depends an awful lot upon what you want out of it. So the place to start is probably to talk about me and why I bought the CB500 in the first place. So at this stage of life I'm in my 50s, unfortunately. It doesn't get any better, but that's the way it is. So I've been motorcycling for well over 40 years. I'm not sure exactly when I started, but sort of 10, 11 years old. Trail riding down under, back in the days when it was not that unusual to have a little wee two-stroke for your kids just to go riding on, and then sort of did the typical thing by like 12 or 13. Now I suppose we're into the club motocross, and it went from there. So ever since then I've virtually always had bikes. There's been a few periods where work's meant I've done very little riding on them for some years, but I've always had bikes, mostly motocross bikes, but if not motocross then enduro bikes. So that's my background really, is motocross tracks, cross country, the bit of trail riding. In terms of road riding, therefore, I hadn't done much. In my youth, I grew up in that generation in the 70s where you started on typically started on a bike, because you didn't have the money for cars, and that was normal. And like a lot of people back in those days, my first bike was a SL125 Honda, which must have put out about 15 horsepower if you're lucky, possibly even less. So it's even safe for a teenager. So I spent a while riding that, and then over the years I'd had a few. We had a farm for a few years, and we had a trail bike, a DT175. So that was kind of my go-to commuter weapon for going to rugby and those sorts of things. But aside from that, I haven't done a lot of road riding, and I've never had a proper road bike in all that time. So for most of the time, once I got beyond my 10 years, I've just been driving in a box and riding off-road motorcycles. So for years I've sort of wondered about road bikes, and do I want a road bike? What would I enjoy? Do I want to go touring? If I want a road bike, what sort of road bike, and so on. And so that's been an ongoing issue for a lot of years. But as I've got to my 50s, I'm still riding motocross quite regularly, and cross country quite a bit. That's a little my preferred these days, because the motocross is getting pretty hard on the knees. But but it's definitely getting to that stage of life where you're thinking, yeah, I'll ride as long as I can in the off-road, but it's getting hard work, and I may not have that many more years left, certainly for the motocross, that's for sure. But you know, so there was time to check out other forms of riding and touring and adventure riding and all that sort of stuff. So it's time to look for a road bike. So then the question is, what sort of road bike do you want? And so I had a bit of a cheat sheet of things that I was looking for. So being a dirt rider of lifetime experience really, and especially one that's getting on in a few years, I'm not comfortable hunched over on a bike, and I don't see myself going any great distance on a bike that way. So the upright stance of an adventure bike is quite appealing. And of course the other thing about adventure bikes in general is, well, you know, I think the modern adventure bike really is just another name for a practical motorcycle, at least what I would call a practical road motorcycle. What I mean by that is it's got a relatively comfortable seating position, preferably some reasonable weather protection, a good fuel range, those sorts of things. So I had an adventure bike in mind, possibly for the purposes of sort of, you know, going into the back blocks of Wales and Scotland and stuff like that, but not necessarily, but an adventure bike. And I guess the other thing with the adventure bikes is the roads here, I'm not sure if you can pick it up on the GoPro, but they look nice enough, but actually a lot of these back roads are really quite lumpy and bumpy. So no big deal, but a little bit of suspension is actually quite useful on these sorts of roads, and that's key as well, isn't it, as to what sort of roads you'll be riding it on. So I was in the market for an adventure bike. Now obviously there's lots of different adventure bikes you could choose, but there's a complication, and that is, for all my years riding on very tall off-road bikes, I'm really quite short. So I'm about 5'6", 5'7", something like that myself, but more importantly, still quite short in the in-leg seam. I'm about a 27-inch inseam, which is quite short even for someone of my height. So that's a big issue for me, or was a big issue, and in fact it rules out right at stage one a lot of the adventure bikes, just like the new Tenere. Having had lots of YZs over the years, a nice new Tenere would look brilliant in my garage, but there's no way in the world I'm ever going to be able to ride one, because the legs would just be dangling off it and I'd fall over at the first set of lights, and that's not a good look. Not good for the bike, and it's not good for you either. So size was a big consideration. So that limited the field quite seriously. And then the other issue was, although I've ridden a lot, I suppose, off-road, I'm quite aware that I'm not an experienced road rider, and it is a different beast, or at least I assume that it's somewhat a different beast, and I think the experience of the last 2 years has shown that to be true, that it is a different beast, and you need time to adjust to it. And for various reasons I'm quite aware of what the accident statistics are, and actually there's plenty of greying rockers like myself that wipe themselves out on bikes. So if you're there thinking I'm in my 50s, I'm probably going to be okay, not necessarily. You might be, but you know, biking is an unforgiving thing if you get it wrong, right? And if you're a bit out of practice and not as quick as you used to be, and your bike's about 3 times as powerful as what it was 30 years ago, that's a risky combination. So the other thing I had decided was that actually a low-powered A2 type bike like the CB500X actually would be a good place to start anyway, just in terms of giving yourself a chance to get used to 200 kilos of bike and riding on the roads and all those sorts of things. And then sort of thrown in as a benefit, if you go down that track, you get the other benefit that sort of comes as the sideline, is that those sorts of bikes tend to be quite cheap. And as anyone that's been in motorcycles for any length of time will know, it's quite possible to throw a lot of money at motorcycles, and I didn't really want to throw a lot of money at a nice new, you know, 10 or 15,000 pound bike and then find out that actually it wasn't for me, it wasn't fun, and lose 5 or 6,000 pounds or whatever on it, which wouldn't be too difficult to do. So all those things taken together, led me to a fairly short list of bikes really, because there's not a lot of bikes in the CB500s category, and we've gone with the CB. Anyway, so that's where I got to about 2 years ago when I bought the bike, and those are sort of the reasons that I went down this route. And that's probably about it for this first introduction really, and then the next ones will move on to what I like and dislike about the bike, and what I've learned from it, which has actually been quite a bit over the years. So ciao for now.